Welcome back, Nuggets. This mother clucker's got some thoughts. Let's ruffle some feathers and get into the video. And if you would like to support my baby chick of a channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hype this video if you can, and go check out my other videos while you're here. Okay, my nuggets. So this is the aftermath to the whole Rachel Discord incident that happened. And a lot of you were asking for deep dives on Hecticana, StudioDeets, and Jawbone, the other people who were also involved in these screenshots that were reaction channels, not the general public of viewers. And I didn't want to do that for two reasons. One is that I don't necessarily feel like these people have enough to deep dive on, or stuff that I want to deep dive on for entire videos just on themselves. And also two of these channels are now smaller than me, and there's just something slightly unethical in a way that I really debated going back and forth with myself about bringing criticism to smaller channels when I know how difficult it is to get through these numbers and up into numbers where the channel itself is self-sustaining, and I'm certainly not there yet. I have in the past covered a channel that was much smaller than me, and it was just completely my error that I didn't look at their subscriber count because, I don't know, I was completely ignorant at the time, and it just didn't feel very good. And I was going back and forth with that because it's like, well, does that mean that I'm only going to punch up? And it brings up a whole lot of questions, but I hope you understand what I'm saying with this. So I am going to be covering StudioDeets and Jawbone in this, but it's just going to be as an aftermath wrap-up to explain to you what they've said, what they've done, rather than focusing a whole video just on them, if that makes sense. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from with that. I'm aware that there's a little bit of hypocrisy underlining that decision and a little bit of inconsistency, but I have to be true to my own ethics and moral lines, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to go through these one at a time, and we'll touch on where Rachel is up to at the moment as well. Now, Rachel has been a strong suggestion to replace Amber Lynn in my lineup, and I am very open to that idea. So this may not be the final video on Rachel. It depends what she does moving forward. But what I'm going to do for you to complete the image of this whole incident is run through where they're at, how many people they've lost, and how they were involved and how they dealt with it after, which is interesting. Now, this is my third video on Rachel. If you haven't caught the other two videos, or if you're having a little bit of trouble tracking where the story is up to, go back and watch those, because I literally start from the beginning and take it all the way through to the aftermath, which is this video here. So let's start with Rachel. Now, Rachel has still been consistently losing viewers, not in the numbers that she was in the beginning, but there's absolutely still a downward trend, and she is now under 52,000 subscribers. Now, these numbers were taken yesterday at date of recording, and what I've done is I've taken their peak, I've taken how much they've lost, where they're at now, and then the percentage lost, and it's quite interesting to see how people were hit. So Rachel peaked at the end of October at 65.5 thousand subscribers, and that was after the initial expose she did, but before we found out that she was paying Emily. So that at the moment is a loss of 13.6 thousand subscribers. That is a big hit. That is a loss of almost 21%, 20.7% of her subscribers. Now, she is not regularly putting out videos at the moment, and I think that's wise. I went over her last video in my last live stream, and she's still fully not acknowledging anything. She doesn't appear to have learned anything. She's not taking accountability, and she actually ended the video by saying, "I'm back now. I'd just taken some time off, and I had some fun in Liverpool," rather than, I think what we all want to hear from her is saying, "I took some time off, I needed to reflect, do some soul searching, and work out exactly what I want to do moving forward." That was not the case, because Our dear Rachel has indeed gone full lol cow at this point, which is why she's a contender for me to keep covering. Now, it is worth noting that before all of these exposés that actually peaked her subscriber count, she was at 47.6 thousand. So she hasn't exactly lost all of the ones that she gained. She is still in a net positive, I suppose you could say, but she is absolutely in a situation where her credibility is destroyed at this point. And this tactic that she's taking of not acknowledging anything after that horrific apology video, which, by the way, if you haven't seen my previous Rachel videos, I go through the whole story of all of this unraveling. So if any of this is confusing, just head on back, have a little watch party and go watch those, because I'm not going to repeat everything that happens in this one. So still a net positive after all of that. Moving on to Hecticana. Now, Hecticana has a little asterisk beside his name because it does seem that although Hecticana was involved in this Discord and was involved in the screenshots, he seems to have gotten himself caught up in his own separate drama surrounding that DoorDash girl. I don't really want to get into that one. So it's difficult for me to see, are his numbers dropping because of his involvement with the Rachel stuff, or are they dropping because of his audience not approving of the way that he handled the DoorDash girl story? But nevertheless, he peaked at the end of October at 25.2 thousand subscribers. He's lost to date 4.4 thousand, which is a total loss of 17.5% of his viewers. He is also still dropping by the day, and there's a little bit extra with him that I'll get into when I do his section. Okay, getting into the smaller channels, StudioDeets. Now, I am not clear on pronouns for this channel. I'm going to use they, them pronouns. Let me know if you know. I can do that if I ever talk about them again. So StudioDeets peaked at 9.9 thousand subscribers, which is so ridiculously close to a 10K milestone that it's a little sad, but I will highlight that this is absolutely due to their own actions, naivete, whatever you want to call it. We're going to get into it. They've lost a total of 2.1 thousand subscribers, which is 21.2% of their audience. And that is the biggest hit out of all of them. And once we go through their section, you're absolutely going to see why the audience has responded this way. They are also still continuing to lose numbers by the day. And finally, Jawbone, the smallest channel, but also the least from a percentage-wise hit in regards to viewer loss, also the least apologetic, which I will make a note that even if I disagree with a stance or a personality, like even if somebody's not my type of person, I find that I always have a little bit more patience for people who are authentically them and unapologetically them, rather than masquerading as something else or trying to put something else forward. I find that very disingenuous, but at least if you're going to be a bit of a cloaca, own up to being a bit of a cloaca, in my opinion. You may disagree with me on that, but at their peak, Jawbone had 6.5 thousand subscribers. They lost 800, and that is a loss of 12.3%. But they are still definitely trending down with subscribers as well. So everybody across the board, even if in small amounts, are still actively losing subscribers at this point. Now, I will, just as a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning of all this, before we get into the real nitty-gritty of each of these people, I'm not going to focus as much on Rachel today. It's going to be more about the others because we have been covering Rachel in depth. But I will say that Hecticana, StudioDeets, and Jawbone are not channels that I've watched before. In fact, I still haven't seen any Jawbone videos because his response was in post form. But Hecticana and StudioDeets, their literal first videos that I watched were the videos that they put out addressing this situation. So if anybody else listening at the moment are more regular listeners and want to add additional context to what I have to say today, please feel free. Go ahead. I am not the authority on all of these channels. You'll see why I didn't really want to focus on them in the first place, because I think these people were kind of seen as guilty by association. They weren't necessarily, with the exception of one, they weren't necessarily saying the really bad stuff. It was mostly Rachel, and they kind of just looked like this simping support crew for her. So I felt like they were pilot fish in a way rather than the actual shark, if that makes sense. Okay, and as we move through each section, I'm going to highlight their role in the screenshots and why their audiences are so up in arms about this information. Okay, so Hecticana was not super incriminated by these screenshots. He was shown to be a little bit naive when it comes to the perspective on money that he holds, which, I mean, I think all of them to a point have this kind of stance where they are incredibly money-focused people. And of course, there are people in this world that are incredibly money-focused that perceive that that is the be-all and end-all of everything in life. But there's also people in the world that see it as a tool and something that they just have that is assisting them to move through the world. So Hecticana, in reaction to Rachel talking about making videos to make money, he said, yeah, the people up in arms about it are either naive or stupid if they think we don't make videos for money. So it's definitely not on the level of wiping your tears with banknotes, but it is a little, it shows how he thinks about things. And the only other part that he had to play in these screenshots was, oh, well, then who cares, lol. And that's in reaction to saying that there are some very large channels out there who have admitted that they'd be willing to pay for tea. So it's fairly benign. So as I mentioned, Hecticana seems to have found himself in his own set of dramas. And just to give a little bit of context on that in case you didn't know, because it does seem to overlap with the numbers that I've got here. It seems that a large amount of his audience did not appreciate the way that he approached the DoorDash girl situation. And it got to a point where people were allegedly threatening his daughters and wishing some very bad things upon them. Now, in response to this, he did release one final video on the DoorDash situation. And thank you to one of my nuggets for pointing this out to me. He actually had goodbye in his description on this video. Now, he didn't actually mention anything about leaving the internet in the video, and I very nearly missed this. So I don't know him well enough to know, is this kind of a normal thing that he might do, or is this really him exiting the internet? Maybe he's just gotten too much heat with these two situations happening. Maybe he felt like as a father, his ultimate responsibility was to protect his family, which would be completely understandable. As far as I know, and I'm not 100% sure because I think maybe comments have been deleted, so I can't confirm. It's not verified, but it sounds like they may have been actually making threats, not just getting him to think about things from a different perspective, if that makes sense. I can't see the words, but it was put to me as though he felt like his family might be in danger. So I could completely understand if he decided now is a good time to get out of this space, and it would be such a shame because it wasn't even to do with Girl World. It was to do with something that he wouldn't normally cover. So this is interesting. I don't know whether we will see more from him in the future with this, but he has not uploaded since this video. He did, however, weigh in on the Rachel situation. Now, I will note this video that he did was addressing the Rachel situation before the screenshots came out. So it was still in the zone of things where people were side-eyeing Rachel for offering Emily money, but they didn't realize how deep it went. So we didn't know that she was flirting with her and things like that yet. So this is the time frame that we're talking about.
So I'm sure you've heard by now, but there's a little bit of drama surrounding Rachel and Emily and the whole situation with the receipts, and Rachel offering to pay Emily for some of that. And I was really just gonna ignore it because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. But even though my opinion really doesn't matter in this whole thing, I thought it would be worth just getting my thoughts on record, just in case anybody wondered how I feel about the whole thing.
So, looking back at this with some context, this actually doesn't sound great, because what that kind of sounds like is I know more because I know what's been said in the Discord. I know more about this situation than the public does, so I want to be seen to get ahead of this situation. And that's the vibe that this video comes off with immediately. At the time watching this, people wouldn't have picked up on that yet because the screenshots hadn't been released. But it's not phrased well. And I think with context, we can really read between the lines here.
And I'm not going to go over all the details or anything, but very briefly, basically, Rachel had already released the first video and she was still talking to Emily. And while she was working on the voice memo video, Rachel realized that Emily had some more receipts that could be good for another video, a third video, and offered to pay Emily to keep giving receipts or whatever. And then at some point, Rachel realized that Emily was still talking to Amber and sort of using the situation just to get back at Amber.
So this actually still stands out in my mind. It stood out when she posted this. It stood out in the subsequent videos. It stood out in the apology video. It still seems so weird to me that Rachel felt that she had the authority to dictate who Emily was speaking to. To me, that speaks of deep familiarity and feeling like you have some manner of ownership over that person. Now, of course, that ownership over her could be that I am paying you for a service and I want you to fulfill the service. But could the service have not still been fulfilled even if she was still speaking to Amber? It's weird. It's really weird to put that in as a reason to completely renege on the financial deal that they had in place. And I know that I've delved into this before. Hecticana bringing it up again, and I'm just like, it doesn't feel good to me. And this is probably the major thing that makes me think that the flirting was not just a little bit of idle flirting. It makes me think that there was more of a goings on than that, because like, if you imagine the scenario that kind of pops up in my head, if there was flirting and there was a little bit of a budding relationship, probably not to the point of calling it girlfriend, but maybe to the point of saying, I don't really feel comfortable with you speaking to other people romantically while we're doing this thing. That's what it feels like to me. And then, of course, Rachel continuing exclusively, by the way, since all of this went down, continuing to do videos on Amber. It feels like, and I just want to emphasize, I'm not saying that this is how it is, it's just how it presents. It feels like an ex-girlfriend of Emily going and doing expose videos on another ex-girlfriend of Emily, which makes it seem so clucking weird. And I'm sitting here like imagining if I was doing these reaction channels to like my husband's ex-girlfriends. It's weird. It's too close and it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. And I know a lot of you agree with that sentiment there. And by the way, we still haven't gotten the screenshots of that flirting where we would go, oh, if we saw it, as though it's nothing. Mm-hmm.
And even though we all pretty much knew that was what was happening, we just had to kind of assume. But Rachel has conversations with Emily where it's very obvious that that's what she's doing. Okay, so that's how she got to that conclusion. And so she changed her mind. She says, I'm not going to pay this person anything. And she had already gotten permission from Emily to use the voice memo and to use everything at that point. And from what I understand, Emily was trying to say that no, Rachel offered to pay me from the very beginning and then changed her mind and sort of blackmailed Rachel by saying, you either pay me or take your video down, or I'm going to tell people that. And then Rachel came out and sort of got ahead of it. And we'll get to that in a second.
That phrasing is very interesting to me. Rachel came out and kind of got ahead of it. That insinuates that he does know that there was more happening behind the scenes and that she needed to try and do damage control at this point. But look, I don't know how much information Hecticana had on this situation. So I don't know if he is actively misleading us in this or if he just genuinely didn't know about the setup. But obviously, the screenshots that have come out about the conversations between Emily and Rachel, it's clear that they had a verbal contract deal with each other and Rachel just fully reneged on it. And it wasn't a blackmail thing, it was a stupid deal that she had made. And like it or not, kind of had a responsibility to pay up. And again, I hate that I have to be put on Emily's side with this topic. I hate that.
But Rachel claims that she has proof that that's not the case. I don't know if we've seen that yet or if she's going to show that, but at this point, I do think we can still trust Rachel more than we can trust Emily, you know? So,
yep, that aged super well. I had to go back and re-listen to that a couple of times. It's like, oh, that aged very poorly. Actually, at this point, I think we might be able to trust Emily a little bit more. That is a statement, isn't it, my nuggets? I mean, we have two levels of shit going on. Which one is less shit? And both of them are more shit in different ways to each other. It's just, oh dear. That is an iconic quote right there.
this is exactly why we have the motto, don't touch the poo. I am disappointed that Rachel offered money and stuff, but I also understand it. If I were in that same situation and I was on the verge of getting all these receipts, all these texts from behind the scenes in the relationship between Emily and Amber, knowing it's going to be a huge video, it's going to make my channel blow up, because of course it is. I don't know that I would be able to say no either. Or I don't know that I wouldn't come up with the same idea to make sure I can keep getting receipts. That doesn't make it right, but I get it.
So I found his tone and his message very interesting in this video, because the impression that I'm actually getting from him is that he knows he's been part of this Discord, so he's friends with Rachel. And Rachel is a much bigger channel. I don't know that that should matter, but I have a feeling that it does to Hecticana, and it definitely seemed to for StudioDeets. But the vibe that I'm getting here is that he does actually disagree with it, what she did, but he also doesn't want to be seen to be bad-mouthing her. So it's almost like he's trying to hedge his bets and play both sides, which is different than being objective. He's not simply seeing both sides. There's, to me, looks like a conflict going on within him about what he wants to say and what he feels he should say, which might be why it wasn't super well received, because it does come off as disingenuous. But that's the risk of choosing a team and why I rail against it so hard, because as soon as you pick a side, then all of a sudden all of the expectations and all of the rules and all of the behaviors of that team as a whole get applied to you, and what it deems what is acceptable and what isn't. It's the danger of aligning with people, because it means that you can't authentically be yourself. And while you may fit partially into a team, I think it's pretty rare that you find a group of people with a message where you fully fit, where you're like 100% yes, this is me, this is my people. And it's why you will never see me, quote unquote, aligning with anyone. I will be gracious and polite if they do something positive for my channel, but I'm not going to pretend that we're best friends, and I'm going to be sincere about my communications with public figures, if that makes sense.
But the main problem is that when you touch the poo, right, when you get involved, there's always going to be these ethical questions about who's profiting off of whose story. So you're just going to end up setting yourself up for something just like this. I mean, if it's not specifically blackmail, it'll be something. And I've heard a few people mention that Jordy and the ankle actually offered publicly to pay for the Amber Tantrum video. And they'll probably say they were just joking. But I think if Emily offered, I think they would take that offer. And even today, Alex's Shook said he would pay to talk to Wifey. And I can't say that I disagree.
Okay, sir. No, no. Okay, so this is a little bit of a misdirect to try and get people to agree with his side of the team. Now, I've witnessed Geordie saying this. I haven't witnessed the ankle saying it, and he's just put a screenshot up of Alex's Shook saying it. There is a big difference between those three channels saying what they're saying because they're being upfront before it's even happened. And I know Geordie, I know that he would sit there on his live stream and say, I've got tea and I may have paid for it. You know, he at least is upfront about his movements in that kind of realm. And the ankle clearly, and Alex's Shook also clearly being up front about it. The difference being Rachel didn't tell her audience before or during the proceeding of paying Emily for tea. In fact, I think if things hadn't have gone sideways, we wouldn't have heard about it at all. She only put it up as a way to get ahead of the drama that was about to head her way because she saw the writing on the wall. And she was afraid of what Emily would bring to other reaction channels that would get her caught. And I also think that perhaps part of it is because she didn't want Emily sharing the messages between the two of them. Because, of course, they make Rachel look really clucking bad. So, no, this is not the same. I don't know Hecticana. I don't like this tactic. I think that it's a massive misdirect, you know, like magicians do, where they're performing the trick in front of you, but then their hand goes up and it's like, oh, look over here, and you don't see the trick. And that's the point of it. It always seems calculated to me. It always seems like a manipulation to me when this is employed. I don't know, I can't speak to his character that is who he is, but in this moment, the way that he is portraying that line, that is a misdirect.
So, yeah, it probably wasn't a great idea, and it's a bad look for the most part. But if you're going to get into the enclosure with the exhibit, you're going to have to expect something like this.
See, talking out of both sides of his mouth again, I really do think that he doesn't agree with what Rachel did. I do. I think that's sincere. But he just, for some reason, doesn't want to piss her off. And when something doesn't make sense, that's where my mother clucker brain starts to go, but why? What else is there? There's something else. There is a missing piece to this puzzle that I desperately want to unveil. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. It could be as simple as, you know, a little bit of starstruck kind of, you know, bigger channel. He's a smaller channel. I don't know. Maybe that's not him, but it could be something else. It's enough there to make me go, what are you not telling us, sir?
I mean, was it for transparency? And was it upfront and honest? One side of the debate says the only reason Rachel did this is because she thought that Emily was going to expose it, so she's getting out ahead of it. And then the other side is saying she's telling the truth, this is accountability, etc. And in my opinion, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Yes, she is doing damage control. That's all this is. She's getting out ahead of it and telling you what happened so that Emily can't write the narrative. And I don't think she would have said anything if she wasn't afraid that Emily was going to expose the situation. But also, so what?
Okay, so the truth came first. She's getting out ahead of it and telling you what happened so that Emily can't write the narrative. That's his truth. I believe that's what he actually believes. So that means he thinks she's just doing this to try and placate her audience, to try and smooth it over before shit hits the fan. And then he said the key thing, pretty much what I just said. I forgot he said this as a voiceover. And I don't think she would have said anything if she wasn't afraid that Emily was going to expose her. No, I don't think she would have either. And that is the biggest issue that I have with Rachel, where she presents one image on her channel, but then she is a completely different person behind the scenes. She's calculated and manipulative and very contrary to the level-headed, wise, well-mannered person that she puts on the internet. And then after he said his truth, that he feels the need to also smooth it over so that if Rachel watches this and sees what he said, but also, so what, he says. So that's the clawback that I'm talking about, that he's trying to preserve their relationship for whatever reason he feels he needs to preserve it.
That's still telling the truth, right? Rachel had a couple of options. She could lie about it, or, if Emily said something, she could try to discredit Emily or something like that. But the choice she made was to get out ahead of it and tell everybody exactly what happened.
I feel like this is polishing a chicken poo, is it not? Yes, at the end of all of this, after a series of bad decisions that Rachel had made leading to this point, this probably was her best option. I think the issue that we all have, though, is that it really shouldn't have gotten to this point, and how the cluck did it get to this point? I feel his point here is a little weak, because yeah, she could have lied about it, but she's gonna look bad no matter what. It's just picking the less bad option at this point.
And as much as Rachel gained out of all this, which is a lot, right? She got a ton of subscribers. She probably made a lot of money on those videos. It was a pretty big boon to her channel, but she also lost a lot of credibility with a lot of viewers. She's gonna have to work to earn a lot of people's trust back and stuff. So it's not all bad, but it's just not great either.
And that is truth. I believe him when he says that. And yeah, she did gain a lot. She did lose a lot. Like we discussed, she is still technically a net positive, but at what cost? This is the thing with money-focused individuals that I get concerned about when I hear them speaking like this, because there is so much in life that money comes at the cost of. And when we're speaking about Rachel in particular, for example, this situation that's in front of us right now, yeah, she made some money. She definitely did. She had to give some away too, but she's lost 20%, nearly 21% of her subscribers. Everybody thinks she's a joke. People are calling her a lol cow. People are calling her Rachel Lynn. Her views are way down. I mean, like, maybe a quarter of what they were before. So at what cost? Was that worth it? Was that worth the money to sell your channel for? And money shouldn't be at any cost. Sometimes gaining money is too expensive in other areas. And I think I think not knowing your moral lines really does show probably a lack of like personal self-growth on Rachel's behalf. I wonder if she would do it again, because legitimately, if this is her moral line and she's cool with that, like I say, commit to that, be the mean girl, put that out there on the internet. There's definitely an audience for it. But from where I'm sitting as a fairly unmaterialistic person who likes to live very frugally, I would say that this came at far too great a cost for any amount of money that she could have gotten, unless it was like, I can retire on this kind of money, where she can just walk away and not look back. It came at way too bigger a cost for her.
Like I said at the beginning, all of this is really not that big of a deal compared to a lot of other things that happen in Girl World. And just in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a nothing burger, but I think it's worth talking about. So anyway, I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.
So that was his video. It wasn't an apology video. He actually hasn't issued any manner of apology for the screenshots or anything like that. So, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Like I say, he didn't really demonstrate too much incriminating behavior on those. But one thing that I wanted to show you that I thought was really funny, he actually had this posted before all of this stuff went down, and he had an accountability infographic on how to take accountability, which I just think is so funny considering the things that we've gone through and what we've seen and how Rachel has conducted herself and how StudioDeets has conducted themselves. And it's just, I don't know. I got a little giggle out of it. I thought you might like it too. Okay, so let's move on to StudioDeets. So StudioDeets is probably the only one that has been consistently uploading since all of this went down. And as you can see, the subscribers, even just in the last 2 weeks, have been really consistently dropping every day, which, like I say, it is a shame considering how close they were to that 10K milestone. But look, I will admit that's just a little bit of my little bias coming in because now I'm approaching that milestone. And it's like, I know how hard, you know, even though the percentage loss was similar between Rachel and StudioDeets, those percentages are not weighted the same because to gain subscribers at this level is so much more difficult than to gain subscribers at Rachel's level. And yeah, I know I'm a little bit biased. I'm aware of it. But having said that, all of this is absolutely because of StudioDeets' own actions and response. We're going to get into it. Now, StudioDeets was only featured in a single screenshot. And this was in response to somebody putting up Obese to Beast's video saying popular idiot, obese to beast, also riding the Rachel train. Now, I just want to be really clear here because I have heard some other things. StudioDeets did not call obese to beast a popular idiot. That was somebody else who was a viewer. That's why their name is blurred. But StudioDeets did respond to this and say a 20-minute video could never actually cover what happened, which automatically means this is crap. And they have received so much backlash from this because Obese to Beast, he's such a nice guy. He's so wholesome. I think he might be the most wholesome channel on YouTube. While this kind of video is not his wheelhouse, he's like really strong when it comes to exercise and nutrition and behavioral elements behind the lifestyle. This kind of more reporting style video is not his strength. And I think that's what StudioDeets was saying. Oh, and just a little disclaimer, because that seemed to rile people up that I said that in my last video. I'm not saying Obese to Beast shouldn't have made the video. I'm just saying it's not his strength. He's got some incredible strengths. It's just this kind of video is not as good. It was still a great video though, just saying. His quote unquote weakness is still exceptional. But can I just say as a side note as well, I am here as a small channel taking notes about how Obese to Beast dealt with this situation because first he released a video basically laughing at himself being a popular idiot and saying, thanks so much for calling me popular. And then he released merch with popular idiot on it. I'm sorry, I can't speak. I'm laughing. I just think that is so perfect. That is like really owning it and taking it and putting a positive spin on it. And I'm just like, okay. And eventually something like this is going to be public where somebody's speaking out about me. And I'm like, this right here is how I'm going to handle it. It's brilliant. So StudioDeets' response to this was to make a 30-minute video, which was kind of presented like an apology video, but what it really was 30 minutes of them explaining and justifying their actions. And it just, look, it was not well received. It was heavily ratioed. And if I would say probably the most detrimental thing to all of their subscriber loss that they've experienced. This video really needed to be like a 10-minute video of just saying, yeah, what I said was wrong. It was disrespectful to a channel that I actually really like. And I've learned a lot from this experience and, move on. So it was 30 minutes. I really heavily chopped it down because there is a lot of rambling in the explanation, and I just didn't feel that it really added anything to the meaning of what I'm about to show. The timing of this is after all of the screenshots. I think they waited a few days just to cool off and then they released this video. So let's go through their video.
Hey folks, what's good? I'm StudioDeets, and it looks like we have some chatting to do. We are going to be talking about the whole super secret Discord thing today and how I've been involved and how I've not been involved. My whole story, because it seems to have become news. I really don't have a whole lot to tell, but I do have an experience. And if you guys want to hear that from me, I do not mind sharing it because I really don't have anything to hide.
I do appreciate the response of coming forward, saying that I really don't have anything to hide. But at the same time, I don't know if this needed an explanation. Tell me what you think about this, because as a viewer watching this all go down, I actually didn't even factor StudioDeets in this. Like, for me, the focus was so on Rachel that I didn't even factor anybody else. And I don't know, I feel like this kind of video on this level to something like to one line, that's all they had, just one line in those screenshots. It seems excessive, but maybe it was in response to an excessive backlash. I don't know. It just, tell me what you think about that. To me, this is a bit extreme.
This is my first time going through something kind of like this, you know, this degree of feedback, some of it decent, fair feedback, and, you know, the spectrum all the way to hate in big numbers for me, for my size channel, right? It's not something I've experienced before. Let's just leave it at that. And, you know, I needed a moment. I needed a moment to like collect myself. You know, I'm not a full-time creator. I would love to be at some point, but I'm not. And I was spending time with my family over the weekend. I'm just not making videos all day, every day. And I needed a minute, you know? I needed to reflect. Oh my God, sorry, I'm just thinking of that. I will reflect. I will reflect. But I did. I needed a minute. Kind of gather myself and then be able to think more clearly about it all. I definitely feel I've gotten there at this point, and I'm ready to say it all. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm gonna ramble quite a bit in this video.
I think it's understandable that you would want to take some time just to reflect on it, especially if you've never gone through something like this. Now, my nuggets, I know you got very excited about my past life because in this, I've been saying this is not my first rodeo. Now, while I have had some presence on the internet, which I deleted everything years ago, and I have been viral on every platform except Twitter. I've never used Twitter, so I know what that's like and I know what the hate can look like and things like that. The instance and the very large mistake that I made that makes me familiar with this kind of scenario and how you want to deal with it and where I've learned all of this was actually not online, but it was customer facing and it was very public and it was in a very big company. And I made a horrible communication. And coming back, I almost think that's worse because at least like on the internet, it's just you that you're representing. You're not, you know, you can make your own apologies. You can fix it in your own way. But when it's under the name of a big corporate and you've just royally clucked up and it's out to customers, it's like, it's so big and it's so public and you have the whole company looking at you and it's just, it's horrible. It's really horrible. I learned such a valuable lesson doing that. So look, my history is not as exciting as you probably think it is. It's just that given my unique upbringing set of circumstances, I've lived a lot in a very short space of time and I've made a lot of mistakes in a very short space of time. And what you're seeing now is a little bit more grown, a little bit wiser, you know, having learned a lot, and I'm sharing what I've learned. So when you're having to deal with PR like on that kind of level, it's just different. But the approach to fixing it is still similar. You know, you get humbled, you learn a lot about yourself, and it is what it is.
I'm not going to apologize for that part. I think if everybody wants to know my side of the story, I'm going to tell it in full. And I don't have a script today because I'm really just telling my own story. So I know it by heart.
I think they really should have scripted it They did go on to say that they didn't want to script it because it would have taken weeks and they just wanted to get their story out there. I think that was a mistake. I think that was a little bit impulsive and maybe just, desperately wanting to fix it. But this video was so incredibly rambly and difficult to track. And they threw their dog in, which I think is a thing for them. I don't know. But it was all over the place and it didn't track well. It didn't read well and it was not received well, as you can see by the numbers.
Here's how I joined the super secret Discord that, to me, was literally just the first Discord I've ever been invited to. It was very much a small group of people in a Discord who were inviting me to join them and talk about Gore World. And the reason that they invited me in the first place, it was about a month into when my channel was being attacked and I was getting all of those privacy complaints. And that was also a really tough time. I felt strong and solid in my strategy and what I was doing. Yes, I did feel confident in those moments, but it was also very exhausting. And the moral support that was, kind of being extended to me via this invitation, oh man, it was really welcome. And I have to say, it was so nice to kind of be accepted into this really small group, honestly.
Now, a lot of people have commented saying that this is giving you were invited to sit at the cool kids table and, that kind of thing. It does give that vibe. And now I just want to preface again with saying that I don't watch StudioDeets. I don't know this person. I don't know their character. What I'm doing is reading right here what's being put in front of me. And I am getting the impression that this person is relatively insecure about themselves as a whole, and perhaps doesn't have a solid grasp on the person that they want to be. And insecurity is fine, by the way. This is not a criticism. I'm just saying that I think there's probably personal growth that needs to happen. And I think perhaps they were excited to be invited into a Discord where there are a lot of bigger channels involved. And I think when people are starstruck like that, it does reflect on a little bit of insecurity within the self. And for anybody who needs to hear this, and if StudioDeets is listening to this, I don't know. But here's my advice for what it's worth, my 2 cents. People that present themselves as being the cool kids or as being the people that you want to be around rarely are the people that you want to be around. They are rarely who they present. It's usually, not always, but usually built on some foundation of toxicity or dishonesty. And it is so much better to learn who you are, let your freak flag fly, find your people, the weird ones that nobody else wants to be around. Find those people. They're the people you want to be around, not I don't know what it is about mean girls and people like that. They really have a way of drawing in people that are a little bit more vulnerable and have a way of looking so confident and so cool. And it always seems to be the same sort of person in my experience, but it's rarely worth it. But regarding this privacy thing that they were talking about, so I dug a little into it. I didn't want to do a full reaction to this video because it's nearly 2 hours long, but it seems like they were getting privacy strikes on their channel and suspected it might have been Amber. But yeah, at the time they were being hit quite hard by that. So you could understand how going into a Discord server with a lot of larger channels who have maybe dealt with this or who were giving support and telling them how to navigate this, that would have felt good at the time to a smaller channel who didn't fully know how to navigate this space.
I get the feeling when I see all of these videos covering this, but people think this is a much larger server than it was. But yeah, it was really small. Like, it wasn't just one of these, 500 people, 800, 1,500 people servers where everyone is still kind of a stranger. It was the opposite. And am I naive to have thought of it as a safe space? Yes. Yeah, that is definitely a big lesson I am taking away from this experience. I had never been in a Discord before. This was my very first time. I am an elder millennial who really just hasn't gotten into Discord. Here I am, really needing the moral support and also feeling like, I am still such a tiny channel and I'm getting an invitation into this small group of Grow World people.
So there's a lot of minimizing language going on there, but you can see that kind of cool kids vibe going on, right? And I'm going to call them out for this. I hate that elder millennial shit. I am an elder millennial too, and I think that I'm older than this person, I believe, unless they look fantastic for their age. Absolutely no excuse. No. I had the internet from the age of 12. I had that so amazing dial up. I still miss that sound. It's just nostalgic. But we all saw this as we were growing up. And I'm also not a heavy Discord user. It's just never really spoken to me. I get it. I've been on it, but it's not where I would consider my comfort zone. But using elder millennial as an excuse is absolutely not. If you are my age group and younger, you've grown up with the internet, you know how this works. And my advice, had StudioDeets have come to me, because I'm sure they know who I am, totally. But had they have come to me, I would have cautioned them even to say that kind of thing in a group chat that is actually private. You don't want to put this kind of thing in writing. And in this day and age where you don't even have to put things in writing because it can just be faked so easily, don't give people the ammunition. Don't give people the screenshot, because you don't know people on the internet. You don't know who they are. You don't know what their ethics are. You don't know if they care about you or if they want to see harm come to you, regardless of how they present themselves. You just don't know. So why would you put it in writing? And see, one of my ethics in doing the commentary on these channels, one of my lines in things that I say is that I would never say anything here to you, my nuggets, that I wouldn't say to these people's face. And that is not just in videos, that is in DMs, that is in comments, that is just everything. In any format you could possibly imagine, it's all going to be hand to heart, things that I would say to that individual. And to say that you're naive for thinking that Discord was private, which I've had some of you, my nuggets, say, well, I have a Discord and it is private. That's great, but it's still putting things in writing. And I would caution anybody, especially if you're a public figure, especially if you're dealing with other bigger public figures, you need to maintain that professionalism everywhere, because you don't know who's looking at it. And no, I will not consider that Discord is private, because you don't know who is inviting who in, whether they have permissions or not to do it. You just don't know who's there. And in this case, as you can see, this was supposed to be a nice little quiet server, but obviously there was somebody in there that they didn't want and they didn't catch it. This person didn't hack. They were part of it. There was no social engineering. They were just invited in. So you can't say that this was a private thing, and you can't say because you're an elder millennial you didn't know, unless you were raised in some sort of sect that prevented you from accessing the internet until a week ago. Absolutely not. No, come on. It's common sense. You got a little starstruck. You got a little ahead of yourself, and I think a lesson's been learned. But this explanation, I think, is what upset their viewers the most.
It was not a lot of shit talking, honestly. You guys have seen, like, what is it, 8 screenshots? Out of how many could there possibly have been from that time period? I'm not going to say blame it on the edit, those didn't happen, but I will say that it felt very curated, really, to make us look the worst we could look. The entire snapshot of what people are seeing of this Discord really doesn't represent it well. Did it happen? Yes. Does it represent the Discord? No, I really, truly, it just doesn't.
And that's the importance of not putting things in writing, right? Because they're right. We're not seeing all of the cool stuff, all of the uplifting stuff, all of the, great conversations that they may have had, or even completely off-topic conversations. But the danger of putting things in writing, like I said, even if it was just a messenger group chat, even if it was just a voice note to somebody, it doesn't matter, because you don't know who's on the other side looking at it. These are complete strangers on the internet to this person, whether they're reaction channels or not. So it was incredibly naive, incredibly.
Before I get into the drama of it all, I do want to say this. I know that a lot of people have said there's no such thing as a private Discord, and I would be and have been naive to think anything else. Okay, there are just a couple of things that I want to say about that. The first thing about it is that this was something that you had to be invited to. It wasn't publicly open and available. Only, I think, 1, maybe 2 people had the ability to offer invites. I couldn't invite anybody if I wanted to. So I don't think this can be compared to, for instance, sharing comments that somebody left on a public-facing YouTube video, like I do sometimes, right? Those comments are left there knowing that they are in full public view and will be seen by absolutely anyone who wants to see them because they're there publicly. Whereas this you had to be invited to. It is not the same thing.
Okay, so this is quite enlightening to the thought process. So StudioDeets is thinking in a very binary, black and white line of thinking. Things are either public or they're private. And I agree. Discord is not the same as leaving a comment on a YouTube channel, for sure. That is absolutely more public. But if we're going to speak in the realm of a spectrum, if we say leaving a YouTube comment is going to be the most public that you can possibly do, and if we say having a conversation with a loved one in a room off the internet is going to be the most private, where do you perceive Discord lays on that spectrum? And my point that I've been trying to drive with all of these videos and StudioDeets, if you are listening, I don't expect you to be, but if you are, anything less as a public figure, anything less than that private conversation with a loved one in a room off the internet is up for grabs for public viewing. We live in a world where that's just the reality now. And this is not a new thing on the internet. This has been a thing for decades. So I see where the thought process went wrong, because if you are thinking just in a binary ones and zeros, it's either private or it's not, then it does look like Discord fits more into the private sector, especially the way this one was set up, than a YouTube comment section. But it doesn't mean it's safe. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And what they're describing there about being invited in, well, that's kind of just describing how Discord works. You have to have a link to get in there. You can't just search a Discord server on the internet and go into it. That's not how Discord works. So perhaps a fundamental misunderstanding about how Discord worked there.
I honestly did feel violated seeing what I thought were private conversations being put in all of these videos across YouTube. I mean, just put yourself in those shoes of, man, I literally thought I was just speaking to some relatively new acquaintances, and one of them did this. One of them took screenshots of our conversations that we thought were private, naively, and made them public.
Okay, so a couple of things here. People did not respond well to them saying that they felt violated, that their privacy was violated. This went down extremely poorly in the comments section. And I think you can see why, because it is kind of spinning a victim narrative. And I'm gonna sum this up at the end, but I think mistakes were made here. But the other thing that I wanted to point out was there is an interesting insight into StudioDeets' personality, ethics, and lines of conduct in this one little clip. That is showing them to be a mean girl. And why I say that is because what they're saying is, I thought this was private, so I was happy to run my mouth. Now that I know that it wasn't private, I would have said it differently, or I would have not done that, which means that there's that kind of quintessential talking behind people's back going on. And I think that's always an unbecoming trait in somebody. It also comes under the deceptive thing. And I don't know about you, my nuggets, but when the movie Mean Girls came out, I thought that they had made a documentary of my time in high school. I really do. And I'm not at all proud of it, but we were horrible to each other. I think we were all in various levels of living in a traumatic situation, and we absolutely took it out on each other. Plus, I can say for myself that manipulation was heavily modeled in my formative years, and you get to learn it when you're around that level of a manipulator. I remember standing in the middle of my school when I was 15, and I just kind of had this moment of, this is not who I want to be. And I had this kind of just awakening in that moment, like, what are we doing? And since then, I've endeavored to move as far away from the mean girl thing as possible. And I think that a lot of us have done that kind of thing in our teens, and I would say are certainly not proud of it. But what we're seeing here is an elder millennial exhibiting these traits, and that is unlikable, because you're either coming from having been a mean girl and are not proud of it and find that distasteful, or you were the victim of a mean girl and you see that and it's distasteful, and it's not a good look. And this is why I say all of this audience loss is completely at the hands of StudioDeets based on conduct and response. It's harsh, I know, but I think things could have been done much better here.
And specifically when we want to talk about the payments and all of the money exchanged, not exchanged with Rachel and Emily, Rachel did not bring that information about all of that conversation, the payments and all that, until after it had happened. Like, both events, saying she would pay her to the saying she was no longer going to pay her, all of that had already happened by the time Rachel brought it to the Discord. We had absolutely no knowledge about it happening when it was happening. It had already happened. And our reaction was actually not a very good one. I think almost everybody else in the server had a pretty ooh, that's not good, Rachel.
I do believe what they're saying here because they weren't involved in the money discussions. Their name didn't come up. It was just in relation to that one Obese to Beast video. But I think this is why it's tricky when you're team picking, right? Because StudioDeets has gone and picked the Rachel team and a handful of other channels within that team. But now it's like, correctly or incorrectly, now it's like they've been tarred with the same brush, because we're all here going, well, where there's smoke, there's fire, like attracts like, any number of cliches that you want to bring out, but it brings their better judgment into question. And because, can I just say, my nuggets, if I was in that Discord and I saw Rachel talking like that, that would have disgusted me to a level where I absolutely would have left. So to stay and be a part of that kind of looks like you're giving your consent to that person to act that way. Like I say, correctly or incorrectly, it does wind up grouping you in. And I to give StudioDeets a little bit of a break, I will say that I don't think they would have perceived their joining this Discord as picking a team. I don't think that would have been the mindset. I think this person, the vibe I'm getting, desperately wants to belong somewhere and likes the feeling of belonging, but this was just a very unfortunate one that they stumbled upon.
So just because, there was me in the room saying don't trust Emily, or somebody else saying, maybe you should consider doing this, or maybe you could consider doing that, Rachel didn't have to listen to any of that. We offered our opinions. She took what she wanted and didn't take what she didn't want. That's how this works. She's an adult.
It's valid. It is very valid. But unfortunately, that's not how it's perceived. It is correct, but not how it's perceived. Also, I question why this should be in this video. This is now talking about the Rachel stuff, where this presented as a kind of apology video or a kind of self-explanation video. I think this is where it starts to derail and get off track and things like that. But I do encourage you to go watch the whole video if you haven't. I have cut out over half of it, so you're not getting the whole thing here.
All right, now let's go on to, I think, maybe the screenshot that I was involved in. Obese to Beast is not what I would call someone who is one of the main reaction channels because he also does other types of content.
I actually found that comment a little weird. I wonder how it landed with everybody else. Not the main one, yet he was one of the very early ones. And just because he does other stuff doesn't make him one of the Girl World reactors. I don't know. It's weird. It feels like enforced grouping on Obese to Beast. I don't know. Tell me what you think about that, because that kind of felt weird to me. That statement stood out. Is it maybe a permission base? Maybe it's like, oh, he's not one of us, so he's okay to talk about. I'm just musing with my mind here for a moment. I like to understand things that I don't understand, and I get very curious about them. It does kind of continue the narrative that I've been talking about, though, where there is a team dynamic going on there. So Obese to Beast is not part of their team because he's not a true Girl World reactor. He's up for discussion. He's a much bigger channel. So yeah, not one of us. One of them. Yeah, tell me what you think. I'm very interested.
So I have been watching Obese to Beast for probably about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years at this point. I think he's like a nice seeming guy. He's pretty kind overall to people. I enjoy his takes for the most part. I don't agree with all of them, but that's natural and I don't have to. And there have even been times in the past where I thought that his videos really just didn't have all the information it should have had, given what he was speaking about. Like, it was really missing some of the context that should have been there, in my opinion. And so I've gone in and said exactly that. Like, hey, I don't think you are actually aware, but this also happened, kind of thing. I don't watch his channel all the time. I don't watch all of his videos, but I do watch a good amount of them. However, that doesn't mean I need to love all of his content. Now, does that make it okay in hindsight looking at it? No, I don't love it. I don't love that I use that word. And if I had thought that this was a public-facing thing, I would not have used the word crap. I wouldn't have.
So again, we're confirming there that we will speak differently behind somebody's back, but if we knew that this person would see it, we would have said something different. And, you know, you might think I'm taking a little bit of a haughty stance with this. It does conflict with my little ethical code that I hold for myself. I am not going to be somebody to put my ethical code on somebody else. That's not my business. But to me, that reads very insincere. And they are right. You know, you don't have to always agree with what a creator's saying. Absolutely not. And I actually do agree with them that given my kind of unique upbringing, I actually watch a lot of creators and think they're missing things because they didn't have the absolutely horrible childhood that I did, luckily for them. Obese to Beast did have a kind of traumatic childhood, but in a different way to what I did. So yeah, I often think that people are missing things. I actually have never commented ever on a reaction channel's comment section saying that they've missed something, though. That's a little of a weird thought process to me. I'm like, if people don't see what I see because they haven't had my experiences, I don't feel like it's my place to impose my perspectives on somebody else, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out loud at the moment, but yeah, confirmed. Happy to talk behind somebody's back in one way, talk to their face in another way. It's a rough look.
However, I don't necessarily feel that it's that terrible to have an opinion about another creator's content. I didn't go after Obese to Beast personally. And honestly, I sit here on this channel for the most part doing exactly that, is giving my opinions on other creators' content. And so part of me is very much like, well, I don't know that having an opinion in a Discord on somebody's video is really any different than having an opinion on somebody's video on my channel. It would be a different story if I was attacking Obese to Beast as a person. I didn't like the way he looked. I didn't like the way he cut his hair, or who what city he lived in or why he moved across the country. Making bad decisions, bad guy. Like, I never said any of that because I don't think it.
Okay, so tell me what you think here, because I think that this is a very subjective take that I'm about to do. Firstly, I actually didn't think that it was so much of a big deal. Like I said, I barely even registered StudioDeets in this whole thing, but apparently, it's a thing. For me, the way I'm looking at it is I don't think it was that there was an opinion, and I don't think it's what the opinion was. I think it's the fact that it looked like simping to a larger group of people, right? Like a joiner. I want to fit in. I want to be part of this. I want to be one of the cool group of people. That's, to me, I think, what looked bad, not the actual word, because it was fairly minor. Like people have said much worse to me. So I don't know. Tell me what you think about that, though, because I do think that this is a very subjective. People are going to look at this with their own personal filters and their own set of experiences and see different things in this. But that's my take, because, yeah, we all do talk about other people's content on our channels. I don't think that's the point. And also, this might be a completely hot take, but I kind of believe in the fact that we're all sharing this platform. For the most part, we're all sharing people that we're focusing on, or at least, we might have small deviations to each other, but there's an overlap with everybody to some degree, right? I might be fully crazy here, my nuggets, but I kind of believe in edifying my fellow creators. Like, unless there's been an egregious thing, like Rachel, I'm reacting to her behavior at the moment. StudioDeets, I'm reacting to their behavior. But if you said to me, oh, what about this channel? Have you watched them? I'll be honest, if I haven't watched them, I'll say I like them if I did. I won't say anything bad about them if I don't. I don't feel like that needs to be out there. Just don't say anything if you don't like something. I don't know. I think edifying each other is an important quality because we're all here in the same space doing the same thing with the same goal. Just my take. But once again, I don't put my ethics on anybody else.
All right, Future Deets here once again, and it has come to my attention that people have mistakenly believed that I called Obese to Beast an idiot, which I absolutely did not do. The only thing that I said in any of these screenshots was that I thought a 20-minute video could never capture all of the information that had happened and gone on in this very complex situation with Rachel and Emily. That's it. I did not call him an idiot. Somebody else did, but it wasn't me, so I don't think I should be blamed for that language. It wasn't me.
Agreed. Fact, but also people.
I do apologize for the fact that I used that word. It's not a nice word. I could have definitely been nicer in the way that I stated that. However, at the end of the day, I would still state that same opinion, just deliver it a lot differently in person, right?
Yeah, we got very cyclic there for a little bit. I feel like, and I know they're about to say that this is an overreaction, I feel like this video is an overreaction. It really, 5 to 10 minutes would have been great. Explain your stance, explain you're sorry, explain how you're gonna learn things, and move on. Like, let it go. This was, I think, an attempt to really try and enlighten people to all of the facts, but it came off as just excuses and trying to push the blame onto somebody else, or it didn't hit the way I think they were intending it to hit. And I think in their head it made sense, but yeah, it's too much for a single line of text in a greater scandal.
So that's why I think I was really surprised when those comments and the DMs on Instagram really started coming in, calling me all sorts of things. I'm like, oh, damn, this is watching my subscriber count go down a lot. And I was like, wow, damn, damn. And if there's any chance that Obese to Beast sees this video, I'm sure there is no way, because why would he? Obese to Beast, I am actually quite sorry that I used that language, describe one of your videos. It wasn't fair. It wasn't very nice.
So that was the apology section. Out of the whole 30 minutes of video, of talking, this was it. Just a few seconds of addressing obese to beast. I do think an apology was warranted. I don't know if this necessarily fits the bill. It comes off a little, I am reluctant to apologize. This is silly. I don't know if the heart was really in it, or if it was, perhaps it did not translate correctly on camera, which, as a neurodivergent chukin, I get that. My face does not always reflect the feelings that I'm having. It's a thing. It's just something you need to work around. To the point, actually, I have RBF heckin' bad, like really bad. And I learned very early on, that people don't respond well to that. So I make sure that I always force a smile when I'm talking to people. Actually, even as we speak, I am doing it because it's so ingrained. And it's so ingrained that I'll even do it when I'm text messaging somebody. But knowing one's demeanor is important, I think, for this kind of thing. And I have no doubt, I started this channel from the ground with no platform support from anywhere else because, of course, I didn't want a link back that my mother could locate me and stalk me and things like that. So I started it from the ground. I know what it's like to do the work. I know what it's like to release videos that nobody watches, and you're just talking and screaming into the void for quite a while before people start finding you. And it's so hard to build on this platform, especially in the early bits. And it takes a lot of consistency and a lot of conviction to be able to get past that really bad spot at the beginning. And a lot of people don't do it. And StudioDeets has done it. They've fought through all of that. They've built a community. They almost hit 10,000 subscribers. Amazing. And then it all starts to slip away. That would feel horrible. I fully acknowledge that. And I'm going to sum up my opinions on each of them at the end, but I really think that StudioDeets' biggest mistake here was just aligning with the wrong group of people and then handling a situation that they've never been through before kind of badly. And it is, I don't think it necessarily speaks to the greater character. I think it speaks to insecurity. And I think it's mistakes that we could all very easily make at various stages in our life. And I have no doubt that even with numbers still slipping, this feels futile and so bad. And StudioDeets does have my empathy in that regard.
And what I saw happening feels really disproportionate to my actions. The feedback I've been getting and the types of comments I've been getting, they've been full of assumptions, false accusations, very unkind words. I don't need to talk about it at length. I just want to say it's really been disappointing to have this action, right? Sure, maybe you're disappointed in me. I get it. I do. For that to unleash the type of comments and accusations and slurs that have been coming at me has really just been very disproportionate and unfounded, honestly. Very, very disappointing, very hurtful. I'm not trying to get out of accountability or your feedback in any way. I'm just trying to say I wish that the fallout and the feedback and the name calling and the whole response just felt more in line with the actions that I actually took, which was one kind of rude opinion about a video.
I am inclined to agree, and slurs are absolutely not acceptable in any situation, let alone this one. That is just, no, don't do that. I agree though. I do think that if they are experiencing this is way out of proportion. It was a shitty throwaway comment. It was made for bad reasons. It was also the result of a set of bad decisions. I don't necessarily think this should have been a career-breaking mistake, but we are in a drama community. Regardless of the way you try to spin it, like I tried to pull away from the drama and go more into the behavioral, but I'm still in a drama community. and it does tend to be not very forgiving to mistakes. And I do think this will blow over for StudioDeets, actually for everybody for that matter. But I think this video may have just compounded the issue. It's a shame that they didn't have somebody to run it by that maybe could look at it with objective eyes and say, you know, maybe this isn't a good thing. But one thing that I will say is, and I do encourage you to think about as a viewer, I've had new viewers come over from Rachel and from Hecticana and everywhere, which I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. But just a handful of them have made comments like, please don't disappoint us, or don't make mistakes like this, or, you know, things in that kind of vein, which I think are coming from a very good place. Please don't think that I'm interpreting them in any other way. But at the same time, as a creator, I have to reject the expectation that a viewer might have of me in that capacity, because I am not infallible. These creators are not infallible. I will inevitably make a mistake at some point, if I haven't already in your eyes. And hopefully you will know my character well enough to know that I will not have done it in malice. I've probably done it in ignorance, and that I will immediately try to correct that, because I do not like to be ignorant, my nuggets. But to put an expectation on somebody that they will never make a mistake is to set them up for failure immediately. And I think sometimes it's easy when we're watching creators to kind of put them on a pedestal, or think we know who they are, or, you know, be able to predict who they are as a person. And the reality is that we really just can't do that, because they're just people. And in this particular case, these 4 people that we're looking at, they're all unprofessionals. They're not skilled in PR. They don't know how to do speeches that will placate the masses. They're just people on the internet with a camera and a microphone doing what they do. So I think it's okay to expect people to make mistakes. Hopefully, they won't be mistakes that fully go against your set of ethics and let you down in such a way, which I think is what's happened with Rachel. We all feel so let down because the person that we thought she was, she's not even remotely close to. You know, it's not even like she just made a mistake like StudioDeets did here, but she's actually been presenting us with a facade that is so contrary to who she actually is. So we feel very let down in that way. But I hope that makes sense to everybody. I don't necessarily think that the amount of hate and slurs towards StudioDeets, that is not warranted for this kind of mistake.
I enjoy making videos, and I really enjoy the production side as well as the storytelling part. Yeah, I guess I just want everybody to know that I have absolutely learned some things from this experience. We'll move forward without so much naivete as far as, you know, discords and how trustworthy I can be of people there. I will definitely consider all of the word choices I use moving forward, no matter what the audience or who the audience is, how large it is. I think that's important to remember.
So a little bit of concern with the wording here that makes me think that the lesson that needed to be learned hasn't quite been learned. I think it's not about choosing your words carefully. It's not about discord. And definitely don't learn that Discord is bad, because it needs to be across the board putting things in writing. Any platform, any software, just it's not a Discord thing. But I think my biggest advice in this situation would be, it's not about watching your words. It's about being authentically you. Having the guts to stand up and say, this is me. You may not always agree with me. You may not always like me, but you can guarantee that I will be authentic with you. And I think that's the biggest learning here. And realistically, a learning that we can all do in all aspects of our lives. Okay, so let's move on to Jawbone. Now, let's just run through the aspects of the screenshots that Jawbone actually had to play within this whole saga. So he did respond to Hecticana saying, double check with Flake. I assume he's talking about Snowflake, but the ankle definitely is public and so is Geordie. So I assume this is talking about there being open publicly to purchasing tea for the channels. Rachel also responded to a comment that he made. He said, genuinely considered reaching out to Emily. That kind of money would change my life. Crying, laughing emoji. He was also involved in the flirting screenshot that said, oh, that feels like her dipping her toe into video calling. He also was involved in attempting to make Rachel feel better, I think, after everything, all the shit had hit the fan. He said, I'm not suggesting you watch it as it's pointless, but Geordie has said that you offering to pay in exchange for tea is not a big deal and isn't sure what the fuss is about. So that should clear the air a little bit for you. Fair play to him. And a little further down in this same conversation, he said, so you're not really being publicly hang-drawn and courted, diva, rest easy. So you can see that I think there's a little bit of sense of humor being brought to the table. I think there's a little bit of consoling going on, but nothing super egregious other than the fact that he's also a financially motivated individual. So Jawbone has been hit the least out of all of them from a percentage perspective, but he also hasn't really been uploading since all of this went down either. Now, I don't know if that's a strategic thing to wait for it to blow over or if he's actually left the internet. There's not been anything that I can find that indicates one way or another. I think there has been one upload since all of this, but that's pretty much it. The only thing he's done is leave a community tab post detailing what has gone on, and it's quite lengthy. We're going to go through it though. So tell me though, if you are a viewer and you have more context on this, whether he's left or what he's doing, I would be very interested to hear. So this was after all of the screenshots came out. This is what Jawbone had to say, and quote, I'm not going to sit here and apologize for things I said in private messages with people I considered to be friends. So if you're here to see me doing that, then you should know early on that that's not going to happen. I am posting this just to clarify a couple of things, so this will probably be a long post. In the Rachel messages that have been shared, I was shown poking fun at Rachel for fancying Emily, which was clearly, and I thought pretty obviously, a joke. Anyone who thinks I genuinely fancy Emily or that Rachel genuinely does needs to give their head a wobble. I also interpreted things that he had to say as a joke. I felt that was clear. I don't know if people really didn't get that message or if they're nitpicking or, you know, whatever the case may be. But I think I even said early on in my videos covering this that I thought he seems to have a pretty interesting sense of humor, which I appreciate. I think that needs to be brought to life. He continues, I also said somewhere that I was considering reaching out to Emily for the kind of money Rachel was making. £3,500 for one video? Cluck, yes, I would. I'd still do that today if she wanted to. If you wouldn't have a conversation with a knobhead for a few grand a pop, then you are extremely privileged, and I envy you for that. Now, this is possibly the biggest and only, for the most part, criticism that I bring to Jawbone. To say that everybody is as money focused as you are means that they're privileged if they wouldn't do that. If they have a set of ethics that prevent them from, quote unquote, selling their soul for some cash or selling their credibility for some cash, to label them extremely privileged just because they wouldn't do that is a blanket statement that I don't appreciate. And as I mentioned, these kind of statements say more about the person saying them than about the people receiving them. And although I think it's fine if you also share this thought process, I'm not at all criticizing the thought process itself. What I'm criticizing is the blanket statement that just because you feel that way means everybody else does as well, or they're privileged, is factually incorrect. I've already gone into this in exquisite detail. I'm not going to harp on it, but as somebody who both holds a certain set of rules for themselves and knows what it's like to not have money, this gets me a little bit. I don't like it. He also went on to do a whole lot of stuff about Geordie. I don't think it really matters for the most part. Basically just wanted to let everybody know that he's in fact not a Geordie hater, which, yep, fine, okay. The money. With regards to the money aspect of Rachel's recent drama, none of us in that Discord found out that Emily had been offered money until long after it had already happened between them. And just as a side note, my nuggets, I find that really interesting that everybody's fixating on this particular fact. I don't know if they're just trying to distance themselves from the fact that she took money, or if in their mind it somehow makes their conduct different. I don't actually think this matters at all. Tell me if you disagree, but it's interesting to me that they put so much emphasis on it. And it almost makes me wonder if there were other conversations had that had something to do with this. He continues on. Many of us expressed disappointment and made sure to note to Rachel that we don't think she ever should have offered the money at all, and especially not when Emily tried to alter the terms of that agreement later. But even though we disagreed with Rachel's decision, we also wanted to help her find a path to the right outcome, because when a friend makes a mistake or does something dumb, you try to help them fix it. You don't abandon them and preserve yourself, at least not where I'm from. I think that's fair. I do. And I think it's a good ethical line to have. And I do respect his take on that. It does also, of course, unfortunately mean that you get tarred with the same brush as the friend. But if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything, right? He continues, ultimately Rachel landed on the decision to donate to Beck, partially because it was suggested in the comments of her community post where thousands of people liked and commented that it would be the, quote, ultimate slap in the face to Amber. I can confirm that, my nuggets, there was a lot of that kind of talk in the comments. He continues, you can still go and check that community post today on Rachel's channel and see this is the exact rhetoric shown in those comments. The notion of this donation being a win over Amber did not come from Rachel initially. It came from her comment section and became part of the thought process afterwards. While I can confirm that this is absolutely true in the comment section, I don't know whether it came from Rachel first or whether it came from the commenters first, but it definitely was there in the comment section. He continues on, I personally had some reservations about donating straight to Beck, mainly because I thought it would be good to check with Beck first and ask how they feel about receiving money obtained from another victim of Amber Lynn's story. It's possible Beck wouldn't even be comfortable receiving the money anyway, and to me it was worth taking into consideration. I agree that some things Rachel said were crass and came across perhaps cocky, but to me it felt a bit more tongue-in-cheek than arrogant at the time. Maybe I was wrong about that, but that's up to Rachel to clarify. I think this is valid as well. You know, this is clearly somebody who does actually have a sense of humor, and I think it would make sense that he also sees sense of humors in others. Like, you know, when you're reading text on a screen, you're going to run it through your own set of filters. And if you're somebody that doesn't take life too seriously and sees the humor in things, you're going to be more likely to see that. And he continues, and for anyone thinking I also wipe my tears with banknotes, I don't make enough money for that. I tried wiping my eyes with pennies, but it's just not the same. He's a funny man. Okay, moving on. Poo. Finally, I wanted to talk about the whole idea of touching the poo. As a notion, this is a good rule. However, it's regularly broken by many creators in this community. Salty Crab with Valentine's reveal video, Snowflake, Geordie, Karina, and I'm sure many others have all interacted directly with people in Amber's current or past life and offered them a platform to address the audience. And my nuggets, I don't disagree with this. You know that I sent interview questions to Amber and she responded. I've since redacted those questions because I've also learned that I don't think it's an appropriate, I don't want to be that close to it. I want to report from the outside. And I think what he's saying here is correct. Even the ankle, whose voice for the record I love, and I think he's saying that because Rachel said it was annoying. I also like the ankle's voice. I think it's relaxing, but it's a subjective thing. Has reached out directly to Emily to buy the BPD Rage video. Aunt Tammy herself is currently a mod in Geordie's live streams and regularly pops up to share tea with the chat. So it seems the issue is not so much about touching the poo, it's about who you are and how deep you're willing to go in the poo. I disagree with this. It is not about how deep. It was about the dishonesty and the lack of transparency and the fact that her audience felt that they had been misled or misused within the touching of the poo. He continues, the truth is that I talk shit about anything and everything I have an opinion on within girl world and beyond. I now post videos publicly about Amberlynn and Chantel because I feel they deserve to be criticized publicly for their pasts and presents. My other gripes and jokes and criticisms of other people are kept to what I thought were private chats and always expressed as my own opinion. That doesn't mean to say I wouldn't stand by my criticisms publicly, because I would. I just don't feel it's necessary to call people out publicly for every relatively minor issues I have with their content. I am a viewer first and foremost, and I'm allowed to have criticisms of the content that I watch. It's okay to not like some creators. It's okay for other creators to not like me. This attitude that a person is not allowed to criticize another person, regardless of their public standing as a reactor or a viewer or whatever, is just so strange, especially in a community where criticism and drama is kind of the point. I've been in girl world a long time, almost a decade at this point, as mainly a viewer. Decided to make my own content now, initially to make my friends and some of you laugh. Doesn't make me somehow more important than the average viewer. I was lucky to be included in a small group of people who later became friends and peers, but truly none of us reaction channels are that important in the grand scheme of it all. Especially as a small channel with barely any footprint in the space, no one should care what I think about anything so long as I'm not saying anything bigoted. I mean, I think there might be more criteria than just bigoted, but I get the general sentiment, kind of, yeah. I make videos about poop ladles and farting and fupas and the various absurdities of girl world. I am not and will never be some monument to nuance and morality, and I have never claimed to be. I am simply a Welsh dickhead doing dickhead things, and I don't take myself that seriously. Love, Jawbone, kiss. Okay, so as I've said, I'm not a viewer of Jawbones, but the vibe that I'm getting from this individual is I think that he has a very tongue-in-cheek take to life. And I actually think that this overall is the best response out of any that we've seen so far out of them. I don't agree with everything that he says, of course, that's fine. But here's the thing, I will respect him for being relentlessly himself. I think that had others have followed that thought process, perhaps they would not have seen as much of a loss as what they've seen. And obviously, Jawbone has had the least, almost half the percentage loss that the others have. So maybe there's some merit to this tactic. What I will say is that I think part of the beauty of YouTube as a whole, but let's take Girl World as the specific example that we're talking about. There are so many reaction channels that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you're looking for out of a channel, there is going to be one there for everybody. And I think our differences, whether you agree with them or not, whether they're for you or not, I think our differences are actually what makes us so amazing, because we're all offering different perspectives and different takes, and some of us are funny, some of us are serious, some of us are behavioral, some of us are, you know, nasty about it. I hate to say that, but some of them are. It's what makes it such a good space. And I think it's important to remember that it's okay that you don't agree with somebody. It's okay that you don't like someone. It's okay that you do like someone. I've had people in my comment section saying, I like Rachel. That's great. That's okay. You can. It's fine. But I do think overall this take is probably, yes, the best one. So now that we've gone through all of them, I'll give my summing up opinions and the vibes that I'm getting from this. So, you know my thoughts on Rachel. I think she's been incredibly insincere, and I think she's really taking her audience for granted. And I also think that underneath all of this that we've discussed, she referenced Emily as a DV victim and then treated her like this. There was so much insincerity in all of her dealings, and then that apology, quote unquote apology video, was appalling. You know, you in your apology video, you shouldn't also be pushing the blame onto others. That's not the point of an apology video. And then her conduct after, it's all screaming, I am a mean girl, I am a lol cow. And that's basically why I've been covering her. I think Hecticana in all of this, I think he was just hedging his bets, trying to say what he thought, but also trying to protect a friendship that he had with Rachel, whatever his motivations. And it kind of seems that the issues going on with him are unrelated to this particular incident. My gut says it's probably more to do with that DoorDash situation. StudioDeets, I think, made some errors of judgment, and I don't necessarily think that they should be condemned in the same way that Rachel is, because as I said in their section, I really do think that these mistakes any of us could and probably have made at some point in our lives. I think the video as a follow-up was really bad, like really bad. But I would encourage you, if you felt like it, to, if you have been a viewer, maybe consider giving them a chance. I think lessons will be learned here. And as I've said with Rachel as well, if she turns around and shows growth and shows genuine understanding, I'll be the first person to be singing her praises about that. It's just that we haven't seen that from her yet. Hopefully we will in the future. But StudioDeets, maybe a second chance if you feel like it. I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know how you feel disrespected by this person. So I'll leave that up to you. And finally, Jawbone, I think, is just taking the approach of, if you like me, great, keep following. If you don't, don't. And I kind of can respect that take, because I also take the stance in my stuff that I know that my personality type, my take on things, my delivery methods are not for everyone. And I'm not trying to be for everyone. I'm just putting myself out there for those who I do resonate with. And I think that's okay. I really do. I don't have a problem with his stance. I don't necessarily have a problem with his conduct in the Discord either. As I said, the only real issue that I have is that he's trying to take his perspective on the world and then apply it to all of us, which is fundamentally incorrect. So tell me if I've missed anything here. I know this has been a long video, my nuggets. I'm really interested to hear your take on this. And is there anything that you feel like I should delve deeper into? Even though this is the aftermath video and I'm kind of summing it up, I am still keeping an eye on Rachel, because at the moment she's still behaviorally interesting. And until she stops being behaviorally interesting, I think she's worth covering. But if you're still here listening to me, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you deeply. And I think this is probably where a lot of the issue has stemmed with this whole incident, is a lack of appreciation for the audience that got you where you got you. I think it's important to remember that. The viewers are everything. You are everything. And an extra big thank you to all of my cluckers. My very next video is going to be part 2 of my members only series that I'm doing at the moment on the physiology of certain conditions that I can't say on YouTube. So if you're interested in some deeper dive content than I can do on my free to viewing platform, please consider supporting on Patreon or YouTube memberships if you can. And the if you can is very important. Do not do it if it stretches you too far. But that's all the clucks I have left to give. Stay golden, my little nuggets, and I'll catch you next time.
Hey,